Jungkook pushed the door open with a force that made the hinges groan. His broad shoulders danced under the weight of his frustration. Wine pinched slightly from where she stood, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her dress. The room was silent, save for the sound of Jungkook's heavy footsteps as he entered and slammed the door shut behind him. His jaw was clenched, and his dark eyes avoided hers entirely. Jungkook, why did you agree to this? His voice was low, sharp, and dangerously calm, but his fists were tightly clenched by his sides, betraying the storm brewing within him. Fine, I didn't, she replied quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. Fine, I was given no choice, just like you. Jungkook froze mid-step, turning to face her fully. For a moment, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. His tailored suit only accentuated the tension radiated from him, but the flicker of guilt in his eyes softened the edges of his anger. Jungkook muttered bitterly, running a hand through his dark hair. And yet here we are, trapped because of their decisions. I know this isn't your fault, but it doesn't make it any easier. Jungkook, you shouldn't be here, he said after a moment, his tone quieter but no less intense. Jungkook, you don't belong in this world. You don't deserve to have your life ruined because of me. Fine. And you think I had a choice? This isn't just your life that's been upended, Jungkook. It's mine too. But I didn't run away from my family. I stayed. And now here I am, just like you. Jungkook's jaw tightened and he turned away, leaning against the desk with his back to her. Jungkook, you don't understand. Staying means you have signed up for a life of danger, fear, and you don't deserve this. Fine. I didn't choose this, but I'm here now, and so are you. Jungkook didn't respond. He just stood there for a few seconds and then stormed into his mother's private room. His fists clenched at his sides. His mother, a poised and regal woman, looked up from her tea with a calm expression, her sharp eyes betraying no emotion. Jungkook, why did you agree to this? Jungkook's mom, what do you mean? This was the only way to salvage the situation after what her sister did. Jungkook, her sister ran away because she didn't want this life, and instead you threw wine into it without a second thought. She's a kid. Jungkook's mom. She's a young woman, and she comes from a family that owes us everything. You should be grateful we didn't take more drastic measures after that humiliation. Otherwise, your father wanted to kill them because of how they betrayed us. Jungkook. Grateful? For ruining an innocent girl's life? Or for forcing me into a marriage I never wanted? Jungkook's mom. You have responsibilities, Jungkook. Your duty comes before your feelings. Wine is your wife now, and she is your responsibility. Protect her or leave her. But know this, if you fail, it won't just be her life that's ruined. Jungkook's jaw tightened, his chest heaving with restrained fury. Without another word, he turned on his heel and left, slamming the door behind him. When Jungkook re-entered the bedroom, he was quieter, his anger muted but not entirely gone. Vine looked up from her seat by the window, her hands clasped nervously in her lap. He didn't slam the door this time. Instead, he shut it softly and leaned against it, his head tilting back as he exhaled deeply. Jungkook, I'm sorry, he said suddenly, his voice low. Wine blinked, surprised by the unexpected apology. For what, Jungkook? For all of this? For dragging you into a life you didn't choose? For the way I acted earlier? None of this is fair to you. Wine, you're not the only one who feels trapped. Wine replied gently, standing and taking a tentative step toward him. Wine. But being angry at each other won't change anything. We're in this together now. Jungkook looked at her, his dark eyes softer than they had been before. Jungkook, you're braver than I thought. Or maybe just naive. Either way, I won't let them break us anymore. Wine blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. She took another step closer, her voice softer now. Wine, maybe we can protect each other then. Jungkook looked at her again, the intensity in his gaze making her heart race. For a moment, the tension in the room seemed to shift, the air growing heavy with an unspoken understanding. Jungkook, don't make promises you can't keep, he said quietly, but his voice lacked the venom it had earlier. Fine, and don't you underestimate me, she replied with a small, determined smile. He didn't smile, but for the first time of the night, the edges of his anger softened just a little. Jungkook, let's see how long that determination lasts, he muttered to himself before turning away and sinking into the chair by the window. Wine watched him in silence, unsure of what to say. After an hour, the room was dim, the only light coming from the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Wine sat curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring out the window on the other side. Jungkook sat in a chair across the room, his sharp gaze focused on the outside of the window. You should be asleep, Jungkook said, his voice low and firm, breaking the silence. Wine glanced over her shoulder, raising an eyebrow. So should you. I don't need you worrying about me, he replied flatly, leaning back and crossing his arms. Wine, I'm not worrying. I'm just stating facts. You look like you haven't slept in days. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Jungkook, and you look like you're planning to run off wrapped in that blanket. Why are you doing? What are you doing sitting there like that? Wine smiled faintly. Thinking. About what? He asked, his tone unreadable. Wine. About how strange this is. A week ago, I was just me. Now I'm married to you. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. Trust me, I didn't plan for this either. Wine. Really? I thought marrying someone 8 years younger than you was every guy's dream. She quipped lightly, trying to ease the tension. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment she thought she might have pushed too far. But then he leaned back, his expression unreadable. Jungkook, I'm not every guy. Wine. No kidding. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. You've got a lot to say for someone who's barely out of school. Wine. I'm 18, legally an adult. Jungkook. That's cute, he said dryly, the corner of his mouth twitching. Wine narrowed her eyes, but there was no real malice in her expression. Wine. And you have got a lot to say for someone who's supposed to be scary. Jungkook. Scary? Wine. You're not as scary or cool as you think, she said boldly. He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes narrowing. You will know soon what it means to live with fire every day. Wine. Maybe. But I think even fire can be controlled if you're careful enough, she said, meeting his gaze, her voice softer now. Jungkook didn't reply immediately. He just watched her for a long moment, his intense stare making her heartbeat quicken. Finally, he started walking toward the bathroom. He said, "You talk too much," he said, and went inside the washroom. To be continued.